Greetings, YouTube. Whenever I hear the word decency, it sets off little alarms in my brain because that's a very plastic term. It can be smushed and stretched in all kinds of different ways. And what it most often refers to, at least in my opinion, is conformity. If you are acting in a decent manner, you are acting in a manner that conforms to a particular situation's laws, codes, and mores. Um, you can be considered to act decently on a large communal scale. For example, if you are in public, walking down the street, it is considered to be decent if you are not naked. If you are naked, then you are not decent. And if most places have rules against that. I don't think they should. I think public nudity should be perfectly legal. Um, and no, I am not a nudist, nor do I ever want to be one. Um, but also decency in a house of worship. There are certain behaviors that you're expected to abide by when you're in a house of worship. So, for example, if you're in a mosque, I would be expected to have a kufi on. That would be considered appropriate. I own some. I actually just find them quite comfortable. If you are at a funeral, you are expected to act with certain levels of decorum or decency. But sometimes decency is not just about the social norms that we all experience on a daily basis, and they do vary from culture to culture to culture. What is an act of decency in one place is not necessarily going to be considered an act of decency in another. Much the way speaking distance is considered differently from one place to another. In America, we prefer about 22 inches chest to chest. That's how close we're comfortable with working, with speaking, just shy of 2 feet. Whereas in Europe, it's more like 14 inches, which is why most Americans think of Europeans as being in their face when they're talking. That's the perfectly comfortable distance for a European. It is not a perfectly comfortable distance for an American. It's just the way we have been raised, and it's just the way they have been raised. There's nothing wrong or right about either. It's just that both of them view the other as one too close and the other as standoffish. No, it's also got a political dimension. And politically, decency is, again, all about conformity, but it's also about not rocking the boat, about maintaining the status quo. Protests are considered an act of indecency, even though there are no rights without riots. No one is ever going to give a right to another unless that group that wants the right makes themselves so annoying, so disruptive that the other group says, okay, fine, we'll give in to some of your demands just so you'll stop doing this. And that's how you push things forward progressively. You make it clear that not only will you continue to protest, but you'll continue to vote in a way that pushes things forward as to the best of your ability. And this is how a civilized culture functions. You use protest, nonviolent protest, to move things forward. Unfortunately, there are times when nonviolent protest isn't enough. As I said, there are no rights without riots. Um, But again, even the definition of a riot is all dependent on who is making the call. If it's a Black Lives Matter group who are disrupting things and causing damage to property, that's considered to be a riot. Whereas a huge group of white people, thousands of them, marauding through the streets, tipping cars over, setting things on fire because their favorite sports team lost, that's not considered a riot, even though they do far more damage than the Black Lives Matter group. This is not something I'm making up. This is not a hypothetical. This has actually happened. The white people are let off. Okay, that's just, they're being exuberant. They're just upset. Where the Black Lives Matter folks, particularly if the majority of them are black, are being indecent. They are being disruptive. So whenever I hear the word decency, it sets off alarms in my head. And I pay attention to who's using that term and in what context. And sometimes the context is, I just want them to be quiet. I want them to not disrupt the status quo. And if you're okay with the status quo, where the status quo means that some groups don't have civil liberties and human rights, you're in the wrong. And the people being disruptive, the people being indecent, they're in the right. I don't care what the law says. If your laws say it's okay to be discriminatory towards a group of people in your culture, in your country, and you can deny them civil liberties and human rights, you're in the wrong, and you'll always be in the wrong to make an adjustment to that so that things are right.